second. We're going to do a tech check and see if we've got good audio. And people are starting to come in. Hello, everybody. All right, as Carmen standard here, somebody could give me a yes, you're good on audio. Hi, Natalie and Regina and Victoria. That'll let me know that we're all set in Zoom. We're just doing a couple of technical checks here, and then we're going to get started on one of my favorite topics. All right, I see we're rolling out on Facebook. So if somebody on Facebook could give me a thumbs up that all is well there, that would be great as well. So we're just going to give it a second and make sure audio is clear. Somebody just pop in the chat for me. Anybody, doesn't matter who you are, just tell me you can hear me okay. Hello, Cheryl. Hi, everybody. Serena, Stacy, Tara, I can't keep up. Still waiting for an okay. Yes, I can hear you. So good. Thank you so much, Natalie. Thank you so much. Okay, so I want to go one more check out to Facebook and make sure we're good there. Hi, everybody out on Facebook. So as a reminder, for those of you on Zoom, the Q&A is at the bottom of your Zoom. Thanks, Regina. Appreciate that. And Dorinda. So any questions that you have, please put them in the Q&A so I can track them. I tend to lose things when they get into the chat. Anyone out on Facebook, you can put your questions in the comment, but it'd be beneficial if you're in the room with us, but I will return to Facebook and check questions as well. But they seem to have a way of removing my questions at times. So we're going to just hope for the best. All right. So today we are talking about boundaries with Kaka Ray, my absolute favorite therapist ever of all times, one of my favorite people and friends, and one of my favorite topics. So today will be a lot of fun. Thanks for being with us today.
I am so excited to be here. This is always a highlight for me. I think we've done this 4 times now, maybe.
Yes, and we've snuck boundaries in here and there, but I don't think we've ever dedicated the topic to boundaries. So I want you to tell everybody who you are real quick. A lot of people are already familiar with you. Some people have even come to see you. So tell us who you are, and then we're going to get started.
I just saw Bobby say hello. Hey, Bobby. I wish I could see everybody's faces. I guess that's, too. I mean, I feel like I'm talking, well, but talking to you is great. So my background is I've been a licensed marriage and family therapist for a lot of years now, over 20, I think. Primarily now I am a trauma therapist. And I would even back away from that a little bit and just say a brain-based therapist. So our profession has moved at the speed of sound as technology and research have also to looking at what's going on with a human being in terms of the brain as opposed to diagnosing them with some kind of character issue or, you know, shaming, whatever you want to say. But bottom line is I look at the brain and the body because that's so beneficial now to what we know and what okay, so that's one soapbox I could get on. But in relationship to boundaries, the fun thing for me is that boundaries was the first class I ever taught when I was actually in graduate school. So it's near and dear to me because I needed them badly in my own life. And so as I started learning, kind of one of those physician healed ourselves things when you're forced to learn things as you guys are doing in your lives as coaches, as you learn stuff, you can't take anybody further than you've gone yourself. So you have to do the work that you're learning about or it falls on deaf ears. So I began that journey and as I was teaching that class and just realized that I had never been taught boundaries and they just made so much sense. And I would say it's an elementary technique, style, skill, but one that is vital to everybody's well-being. Yeah. I hope does that make sense what I'm saying?
It does. So what is the actual definition of a boundary, or what is the definition of boundaries from your professional perspective?
Okay, so the easiest thing to think of is a property line. We all have property of something, and what we want to be able to do is delineate our property from someone else's. So it's on an emotional level or even a physical level. It is the distance between me and my people, or me and other humans. And those, what we learn is, do we need a fence or do we need, a concrete wall, and anything in between there, but we have to have them there. I don't yet know of any healthy relationship that is void of boundaries.
Right. And in my mind, one of the first things that comes to my mind, and one thing I always appreciate about you, KK, is that you're wide open about the fact that you have these things to learn. Right. And I tell my coaches that all the time. I always say, my therapist has always said to me, you can't take people any further than you're willing to go as well. So that backtracks me to many years ago when I started working with you. And I remember you bringing up, the word boundaries. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And you're like, well, okay. So I think we have a clear lack of boundaries here. And I'm like, well, tell me what they are. So that's the first indication. If you don't know what boundaries are, you probably need some work in that area, correct?
Well, 100%. And even further than that, I would go to say we have to look at the underlying why of why you haven't had boundaries, because for the most part, absolutely no shame. You don't want to look through it as a lens of shame, like what the hell's wrong with me that I don't know what a boundary is. It's more like what happened to me over the lifespan that I did not learn those, or if I did learn them and that was taken away.
Right.
So we have to look at the context of what did you grow up in that in formative years, and we would say now formative is crucial is even pre-pregnancy of your mama,
Mm-hmm.
and to two, that time frame is very, very crucial, but all the way to 25. Our brain is still developing, and maybe even post 25, depending on what you've been through. That is extremely traumatic. So
Yeah.
I think I just got off on a tangent.
I love your tangents because they always add so much value to our conversation. So for me, one thing that made it, and you know me more probably better than most people do, certainly better than my ex-husband ever knew me, or maybe even my own parents. But you know that when I learn about something that is something that I need to work on, or something that's going to help me to heal from any open wounds or things that I deal with, I go full bore in and I learn everything I can. So I have read endless amounts of information about boundaries, and we're going to talk a little bit about attachment theory too, because I think that's just as important.
Yeah, huge.
But one thing that really helped me was to put it in layman's terms, which is what we're trying to do today, because we're talking to the general public right now, right? We're talking to coaches as well, but also the public. And so that may have never understood or even heard of the word boundaries. For me, this was what was really helpful for me to understand it was, where do you end and where do I begin?
Right.
And
right.
I had absolutely no idea where that line was. None at all.
Yeah. And just a fair warning, if you are one of those people that have never considered that you have the right or even know what a boundary is, that what tends to happen is we go from no boundaries to seeing boundary busters everywhere. So just take a deep breath as you're starting to learn, where do I end? Where does somebody else start? What rights do I have? What rights do they have? Just know that it can be evoking in you deep responses, because you start to look at these things and it can stir you up quite a bit. But what I like to say is that there needs to be white space in between people. And so that's, where do I stop? Where do you start? And is there distance in between there so that we can be autonomous human beings? Because we were made and hardwired for connection, but we were not hardwired for enmeshment. So connection looks like this, moving, thumb to thumb forward in life with people. And enmeshment looks like this, all glommed up, which you don't know what direction you're going. So it's a continuum. So balance would be this. Enmeshment on this end would just be, I don't know where you stop and I start, and it's chaos. The other end is total disconnection. So separation, or we call that cut off in clinical terms. The interesting thing to note is both ends of that continuum take the same amount of energy. Or that's not true. They take a lot of energy, both ends. And so that's one way. If you're in relationship or totally out of relationship, and those are bleeding you, then we know we got to get to balance at some level.
Totally makes sense. And one of the visuals that I like is, I know I follow Mark Groves on Create the Love. I think he's just amazing. He's doing amazing work for relationships. And he likes to think of it like two circles. And sometimes when you see people talk about their relationship, they're like, oh, we're one. And you might see these graphics where it's a circle and a circle and there's a little space in between and it's us and all this cheery, fairy tale stuff. But he says, in reality, you have a circle, a person here and a person here, two autonomous individual people. And then in the middle, there's actually another circle, and that's the relationship.
Yeah.
So if you're each individual and autonomous, and you understand that and you have clear boundaries, then the relationship that you have together actually becomes its own thing.
Right. No, that's excellent. And I sometimes say two halves don't make a whole. It's two wholes that make a whole. And one of the things that we could even go into, what does it mean to be autonomous? That word is, it's a big word, and it took me a while to learn it, but autonomy just means that I'm okay, regardless of what's going on from the inside out. I'm okay to function as a grown ass adult.
Yeah.
And the goal of parenting, one of the goals of parenting, is to get your little humans to the place of being able to, when you hear somebody say, if I lose that relationship, I will absolutely die. You won't die. You will be really, really sad, have a whole lot of grief, but you still have to know in your brain that you are going to be okay to function as a human being if you lose that relationship.
Right. And that's always one of the most helpful things for me is I remember you saying to me, yes, you intellectually know that you're not going to die if this marriage ends, right? But your body doesn't understand that. Your physiology thinks you're in such a state of despair or, sadness and in such chaos that you feel like you're going to die. So one of the things you told me one day before I left the session in the heat of the crazy was, what I want you to do is, when you feel that way, is just to remind yourself, I'm not going to die.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds crazy, but I use that all the time with my clients. I always tell them, your body's in this crazy state. This is a simple statement my therapist told me that was amazing, was just remind yourself, you're not going to die. It's painful. It's hard, but it's not death.
Yeah. And so what happens there is, and this is getting into a whole nother theory, but if you guys are taking notes, write down, it just went out of my mind. I'll come back to that. But what we want to say, the brain, this is our frontal lobes. Down back in here is the brainstem, and internal family systems. Write that down. I call that parts work. And so if you're working with a therapist and you say, can we work on some parts work? We all say, there's a part of me that feels this way, a part of me that feels that way. And in clinical terms, that's an internal family system. My theory is that we have a lot of parts that get arrested at points of trauma in our lives. And so what happens is that when you feel like you're going to die, you've regressed to a younger part, that at that age, if somebody left you or you had a loss significant, you might really die. You really might, if you're a child that doesn't have a caretaker. So the reminder, what happens is you're down in this brainstem of fight, flight, and freeze. Okay. And that is only life and death. There's nothing in this part of the brain that is gray. It's all black and white. It's either life or death. So when you get curious or remind yourself, what you're doing is you're bringing yourself up to the human part of the brain, the out of fight, flight, and freeze. So you say, you're not going to die. So that's a human thought. Or you can be curious. And that's another part of the human brain to say, why would I think I'm going to die? And so you've shifted the neural pathways in your brain at that moment to come out of that. Wow, we're way off from boundaries, but it's very important there because if you're in fight, flight, and freeze regarding a relationship, there's no way that you can have autonomy.
Yes. So circling back to it, it's all relevant to boundaries, in my opinion, because if you get in that state of mind and, remembering that feeling, that me being down in that part of my brain, I remember that it would then switch that, flip that switch of the insecure attachment, which we'll get into in a minute, and then it would send me into boundary breaking behavior.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
That's
so,
it.
and that, whoa.
Kids don't have boundaries. They only have survival when they're in stress. So yeah, good point on that.
Yeah. And I remember those feelings when I first started learning about it. I was calling myself out on every corner. Like, oh, there I did it again. And I did it again. So I think it's important. So we're going to talk about how this shows up in, we're not just talking about intimate relationships here. We're talking about our relationships with our children, our friends, our family. Boundaries can be broken in any relationship that you have. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, now that I'm aware, right, in my human part of my brain, I am aware when this is happening. I noticed myself less going into those feelings of fight or flight or I'm going to die kind of feelings, because there was a name for what was happening.
Right, right. And what you're also showing is that you exercise new neural pathways, just like lifting weights. We have to do something different repetitively for our brain to do it differently. It's going to always go to the lowest common denominator of survival until we have other options for it. And so you catching yourself and coming up with other options is really important here. Let me just define another just practical way of what is a boundary. And one of the ways you notice when you need them is when someone else busts your boundary or you bust through your own boundary. And we just call that boundary busting. But a boundary is to be able to say what your property line is and verbalize it to yourself or to another human being with the line being clear and the point being clear that you are unwilling for that person to come through or you to go through without permission. So the healthiest kinds are flexible, so Carmen and I have come in and out of a therapeutic relationship into friendship. And I don't recommend that for people that are new in the field, but we know at the points, if Carmen is in therapy with me, I'm not going to be doing business with Carmen. That's a boundary because it's not in her best interest. And it's one of the things as in the helping professions that many of y'all are in, you always want to ask yourself what's in the other person's best interest as far as this boundary goes, not necessarily your own as a helping profession, because you're in a position of power. So you always want to ask yourself what's in their best interest. Does that make sense?
Oh, I love this. Let's stay here for a second, because one of the things that we do in these conversations, and this is a brand new series I'm doing on wellness for the general public, is to talk about how a health coach can actually fit into their lives and help them with everything, right? Food and sleep and things like that. Trauma from a health coach scope perspective, which means referring out to a licensed therapist that can help them. But can you give an example or give us an idea of what if a health coach is working with someone and they're saying to them, like, I want to leave my husband, we don't get along. How would a health coach handle not stepping into the space of answering that problem for them, but giving them some tools to be able to take that home or find a therapist for themselves?
Right, great question. And the first thing you want to say is that on a global sense, you want to be pure to the field that you are committed to. And you want to be very, very sure what your scope of practice is. And then you want to say, okay, how do I influence outside of this? I'm not tunnel visioned. I can see other things. But then you want to ask yourself again, what's in the best interest of that person? Is it in the best interest of that person to have someone skilled, someone trained? And is it keeping my profession pure? And so then it becomes a very objective question that you ask, am I trained to talk about this? Maybe so. Do I have, am I required a license to talk about this? All of those things, it's really, really important, because as helpers, many times we would want, out of the pureness of our hearts, to jump into an arena that we shouldn't be in. And very, very seldom does that work out well.
Oh, 100%. And that's why, I teach a resource-based approach at the Institute for Functional Health Coaching. And I teach my coaches to, first of all, learn about the things that you're interested in, right? But if something comes up and you recognize that there might be a boundary issue or, something going on with their diet, whatever it may be, if you recognize it and you feel like you can educate them by sharing those resources and referrals, that's the best way to do it. That's how it benefits us as coaches to learn about boundaries, right? To be able to share, I can see there might be some boundaries being broken over here by the husband who comes in and tells the wife what to eat, right? Right? Oh gosh, please. I've had that happen. So recognition of that and sharing those resources about the topics and the information we're talking about today, I think would be beneficial to them, because it keeps them over here but also provides that assistance to that client. Would that be fair?
100%. The other thing I would say is it's always fair to ask questions and be curious. You don't lead somebody unless you're 100% secure in your role in that. But you can ask many questions like, tell me how you feel about being told what to eat. You know, and then the other thing is you can always say, would you be willing to have a resource? Would you be willing to get some feedback? I see a red flag. I'm a firm believer in not ignoring just because it's out of your scope. And I think that's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
You don't want to just say, I'm not going there, because that feels worse to the person that you're helping. But knowing your scope, I think is really, really important. And the resource thing it really is ethically responsible when it comes down to it. To have
100%. 100%. So tell me what this looks like. Give me an example of how, I call them leaky boundaries, because in my mind, I always see a boat and I'm the one in the boat, right? Or whoever it is I'm helping with resources. And I see all these little holes, which are those areas that the boundaries are being broken. Maybe it is someone is telling you how to eat or how to drive or how to parent your children or what to wear or all of the other ways that my boundaries have been broken as well. Yeah. And how we plug them is with the tools that we learn, like how to speak up for ourselves, those types of things. And that keeps us afloat or brings us back to the surface.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. Very
good. Thank you. So can you give some examples of what that looks like in marriage? And, or actually I'll let you do the friendship one or something else. Give us some examples outside of marriage.
Yeah. So the first thing is I'm going to go back, if I can say, how do we set a boundary so that you have the terminology? And the first thing I always say is go read Townsend and Cloud's boundary book. First 4 chapters, if you read those first 4 chapters, you've learned the skill of setting a boundary. Now they have incredible resources. They're just brilliant men. I think they have a great podcast. I've never listened to it.
It's great
about it. And so some of this stuff is them. And then I pulled in other stuff with it. But the first thing you think about is, do I have the right to speak out to this person? Is this relationship valuable enough to stay in it? If the answer is yes, then we're going to look at setting boundaries. The first thing you do is you note it within yourself. It should never be easy. It should be methodical, because if it's an easy response, there's a good chance you're doing it to injure the other person. And what you want to remember is that boundaries are always protective. We don't put a fence between us and our neighbor to make him mad. Right. We put the fence there to keep our stuff safe. And the secondary possibility, and this is really important, and we'll translate this to relationships, the secondary possibility is that neighbor will stay on his side of the fence. But we don't set boundaries to change other people. We're not in the business of thinking we're going to change another human being.
Okay, repeat that one more time, what you just said, because that is key. Because I've always tell everybody what you say. You say boundaries are protective, not punitive. We're not doing this to hurt other people. Right.
And if you do it to hurt someone else, you're not in the right spot yet to set the boundary. And that doesn't mean that the boundary doesn't need to be set, but it means that we're not going to be reactive, justice seeking, all the things that I am and have to work on by setting a boundary. What we're doing is setting this boundary to protect what is ours. And in this context, y'all, what we're protecting is our own infrastructure, our emotional well-being, our physical well-being, all the growth work we've done up until now. That's the importance of it. All right. So once you think through that, am I being protective or am I being punitive? If the next step is protective, then you always want to reaffirm the bond you have with the person. So bond be before boundary. So that would look like in a friendship, Carmen, I love you. I value this friendship. Then you put your boundary in place. And that is, I am needing some space So would you be willing to not call me every day? Y'all
Which I
should
don't do, by the way,
call me
everybody.
every day. It's almost crazy. Okay, so then and this is up for debate. And different people will give you different feedback on this, but I don't like to put consequences on people that are reasonable. I think that's shaming in nature. It can be shaming because I don't need to say to you, Carmen, if you call me, and if you don't, then I'm going to start hanging up on you, or I'm not going to take your call, because that would feel like shit, right?
Totally.
Okay. So, but that changes if somebody is a continual boundary buster. So it takes a lot for me to get up my nerve, because I have a very high agreeable compassion score. If y'all haven't ever taken the Big 5 personality test, take it. It's bad.
I took it.
It takes
God
a
help
while
me.
to integrate it.
Yeah.
But it's hard for me to set boundaries because I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. And so if I take, if I take the energy and time to be thoughtful and set a boundary with you, and then you come back around and call me 3 times the next day, then I'm going to set a consequence. So it's the bond, the boundary, and then the consequence if needed.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Totally.
So that is the practical, and it's always kind, and it needs to always be first person. It's not like, Carmen, you're annoying me, so I'm going to ask you not. You're saying, I need some space. What you need, and you really need to. I also like the terminology of, would you be willing? So I could say, I love you. Would you be willing to not call me every day? I really need some space. And so that keeps it from being a real rigid power imbalance. Like, Carmen, don't call me. It's, would you be willing to back off a little bit to give me some space? And that's much more palatable and reasonable.
100% agree. Yes.
Okay. So that's the practical side of how you set it.
Okay. So with and again, with friendships with children, let's talk about the children thing first. I also want to just make sure everybody understands that it is my opinion, only my opinion right now, that these topics that I'm bringing in about boundaries and attachment and all of these things are extremely important right now, because people are in situations where they are they're much closer in proximity to people that they love than they've ever been before. We are in stressful situations where everyone's mental health and emotional well-being are probably at risk at this point. So having these tools in place can be very protective, not only for you, but for your children, for your marriage, for the neighbor who won't stop coming over with their bottle of wine to drink with you every night when you don't want to. Like, all of those things that might be different right now than are in a normal life, right?
Yeah, well, first I would say I'm so glad you brought that up, because we are in a mental health crisis right now.
Yes.
And I don't think we've seen really much. I mean, I hate to deliver more bad news. I mean,
we need to be real here.
But what I would say is that, especially what I want to say is the 20 to 30-year-olds, and many of you may be in that phase, but also have people, children that age or whatever, they are so at risk. The suicide rate, I mean, I think the statistic now is 25% of them have considered suicide. 25% of 20-year-olds,
yes,
some things have considered it. And so we're in crisis. So what I would say is, when as a culture we're in crisis, I've seen it one other time, and it was in the 2008 recession crisis, the real estate crisis. And what I did then, and I probably told y'all this before, but I adjusted what normal range was, because we were so out of whack. Okay, so now it's tenfold of what that was in 2008. So what we want to do for people is normalize, and you are not out of your scope, no matter who you are, if you normalize how hard things are right now.
Right.
Everybody needs to be reminded of that. I mean, I need to be reminded of that today, because it's a hard day, for no reason.
Right.
And so we all need to remember that, and all the more reason to stay connected, but connected appropriately.
Yes, I love that.
During this. So I've seen it on both ends. high enmeshment where people are getting the life sucked out of them. And then on the other hand, I've seen massive cutoff of isolation where kids don't even think they deserve a hug. You know,
Oh,
it's heartbreaking how it goes. So all the more reason to have very clear set boundaries of how you do relationships, that and the healthy boundaries, because when we're depleted, we just want to throw it all out and either go curl up in a ball or go curl up in somebody's lap. And neither one of those are appropriate as adults.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. I appreciate that so much. And let me say, I just saw a comment here. One of my friends and students here, Cheryl, said she needs this right now. She sets boundaries and feels guilty about them. I used to have that happen on the daily. I don't have it so much anymore. I'm much better about feeling confident and strong because I feel like I deliver my boundary with love. And it's not only just about me, it's making sure that I'm not crossing into someone else's yard as well. Right. Where does that come from? Where does the guilt come from? Does it come from nurturing this child?
Yeah, many times, and I hate to deliver this news too, but many times when you feel like you don't deserve or you're gonna, hurt somebody from setting a boundary and you allow it, it comes from abuse in childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And the more heinous, well, if you want to grade abuse, but many times it comes from from sexual abuse, because our skin doesn't even protect us. And so I mean, that's the most malignant, I would say. But also it can even run the gamut of having an overbearing parent who did not allow you to be autonomous, that they guilted you or made you feel bad about wanting to grow up and be your own person. And so they took the right for you to have a boundary away. So they're literally, and if you think of it brain-based, there's no neural pathway there, and somewhere you might have attempted it and that got shut down. So what I would say is practice. Practice and even practice in front of a mirror to do it, and just get a neural pathway going so that that it's a possibility, because otherwise your brain says, never done it before, there's no paradigm for this, don't do it.
Yeah. And then what happens, what I recall anyway, is I would set a boundary. I'd feel really good about that. I mean, feel like, oh my gosh, I feel free right now. It would last just a matter of minutes or hours, sometimes a day or two. And then the guilt would come in, and I would start overcompensating for setting a boundary for myself, trying to fix the guilt and shame that came from whatever by extra this and more of that and do this, right? To make up for that, which makes you feel worse and throws you right back into the shame cycle. And there you are again, not knowing how to put a boundary up.
Yeah, I call that swinging from the chandelier. If you find yourself in relationship swinging from the chandelier, trying to do something to evoke from that other person, you're not in a healthy place. And honestly, you could get right down to it. You're manipulating that other person to get you that feedback that makes you feel okay.
Right. Exactly. So I want to talk about the marriage part for a minute, because that's my biggest experience with, lack of boundaries and trauma and attachment and all the crazy stuff that went through, on with my experience. And let me just preface this to say, KK can back me up here when I say I've owned about 90% of the part that I had to do with it, and sometimes more than I should have, when she's like, now hold on, don't be so hard on yourself about this. Let's look at the reality of this. Where in a marriage, and I want to just kind of generically touch on this a little bit, but here's how it might look, right? So we'll use my example, as a health coach and a person who is headfirst into health and wellness, has way too much information up here about how to help people get well. And then was married to someone who didn't have the same concerns that I had, was more spontaneous, let's just run with it kind of thought process. If I hurt myself, I'll get a shot in my knee and we'll go on with it, right? Mm-hmm. I would constantly break that boundary, trying to come in and fix. Well, if you just take this supplement, if you just eat this way, if you just get more sleep, if you just do that, I was crossing that boundary, not because I thought that I knew better than he did for himself, but because I was trying to soothe myself for what was wrong in the relationship. By crossing that boundary to help, I was trying to make myself feel better. It wasn't about him at all, which was also, like you just said, a manipulation and controlling thing. which is what we do. I think when our lid gets flipped and we're hanging from a chandelier, we overfunction, which is what, I remember you saying, Carmen, you're overfunction, like, oh, is there anything else? Right. But it's true. It is so true. My mom and I had that talk this morning. I said, you were an overfunctioner. I learned how to do that from you. That affected my ex-husband severely. I understand that now, but that showed up with boundary breaking on every corner for me.
Well, one way to visualize this, or the way that I've found to be most effective is, are you mowing your own yard? Are you going across the street and mowing somebody else's yard? And when you find yourself in that other yard, did they ask you to come over there and mow that yard?
Right.
And I don't want anybody mowing my yard unless I tell them how I want it mowed.
Right.
And I invite them in. I mean, if my neighbor comes over and mows my yard, I'm going to be offended most of the time. If the grass is tall, I'm like, thanks for the help. But we don't mow other people's yards. We stay in our yard. And it was interesting. Recently, we literally saw a kid mowing a yard. It was a beautiful home and the grass was beautiful. And his lawnmower had been cut. I mean, I think he was cutting down into the dirt. He ruined the yard.
Oh.
But you know what? As badly as David and I wanted to stop and say, hey, I think you could raise that mower up just a little bit and not ruin their yard, it was not our place.
Right.
And no telling what, we would have interrupted. Maybe it would have ended up fine and he would have been grateful. Highly doubt it.
Maybe he was killing it on purpose because they were going to reseed it and burn it. We don't know. We don't know.
But he didn't ask, and he didn't flag us down in that car and say, hey, can y'all tell me what I need to do on this yard? He probably had a line 20 deep of people he could have gotten information from. He didn't ask. So literally we did not need to stop and mow his yard. So
that's a great place to clarify also. Is somebody, for me, one of the things that I go in my head about when I feel like, oh gosh, I really want to tell them that, I say, are they asking for my help?
Yeah.
Are they asking me for help? If they're not asking for help, why am I putting my energy into trying to fix or do or take over whatever it is they're doing? So that's a barometer for me is the question, are they asking for my help? Now, I'm terrible about that with my kid. Okay. When it comes to that, I catch myself all the time. I'm like, I'm sorry. There, I did it again. You can do this for yourself. Right. So I think that it's really important to understand, and let's talk about kids for a minute too. Because again, kids in the homes, like school got called out yesterday, just out of the blue, everyone home. Mine's home anyway. But I know that kids are coming in and leaving and coming in and leaving. There's many areas for parents to break boundaries when their kids are home all the time. So let's talk about what that looks like as a parent. Can you give me an example of a parent breaking a boundary? I can give you many of mine, but I think I'm getting better. So I'd rather you.
Yeah, I think, and full disclosure, we're not just helicopter parents. We moved in right behind our kids' school. So we're the Velcro kind.
Okay.
But, and that was highly offensive to me when I first heard about it. And it's so true, but kind of the rule of thumb, there's a progression of parenting. Early on, you want your policeman. You're setting the rules, setting the boundaries, keeping them right, wrong, and that's necessary. That's early formative years. Then you become a coach, and that coach is teaching where the boundaries are and leading. They're not out on the field playing, so you're not going to go out and beat up the bully. You're going to give them the skill to go do that. I know I've wanted to do that myself. And then we've launched our kids. And so now we're consultants. And the only time you policeman, coach to consultants, the only time consultants come in to give feedback is when they're paid and asked to come in. And so it depends kind of what age and stage your kids are. Many times what I see is we get that backwards. We act like consultants early on and let kids act a fool. And then when they start acting even worse and the consequences are higher, then we start acting like policemen. And it's so we want to do that in the right order. Now, what I would also say in this kids in and out of the house and us breaking boundaries, they also break boundaries. especially the older they are, you know, it gets harder to say, this is my house, this is what I need in my house, because we feel like we're not being generous, or we're trying to keep the relationship intact, all of those things. So during COVID, I have seen a lot of depletion of parents, because these kids, there's not a lot of boundaries. So I would say, let's start with, what are the expectations in the home on both sides? Not just what do we, you know, who are we going to be as parents? Are we busting boundaries? But to answer your question, one of the most egregious things we do is we step in too soon for a kid when they aren't asking for our help. Now, I'm a firm believer. I am the mom that if an essay was forgotten or a book was forgotten, I drove it up. A lunch was forgotten. My rule of thumb for parenting on that kind of thing is that kids have enough obstacles in their way without us allowing obstacles when we can help clear the way. That's just how I believe. You guys can argue that if you want to. I feel like with adult children, that has been a good plan for us, not to create obstacles if we can help. Now, that's not to say we would allow patterns to exist. If it's incidences, we're going to step in. If it's a pattern, we're going to correct the pattern. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I love how you said that: police, coach, consultant. And that's something I absolutely need to remember. You know, and when do you become the consultant? When they're 18 and on their own?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the earlier you can become a consultant, the better, because that means you've done your job of instilling they're starting to own their own infrastructure instead of borrowing it. And that's the goal, is we want them to own, we want them to go through that crisis we call it crisis of belief. What do I believe for myself? And the sooner they can go through that, the better. So you push that envelope to get them to attempt things. I can remember with our Kelsey, she had a conflict with a basketball coach. And what I wanted to do literally is to get my car, drive 2 blocks, and blast the hell out of that coach, because she was wrong. But what was best was Kelsey had home base, was safe for her. So she came home. That's one thing you want to make sure, that you have boundaries around your home that say, this is a safe zone. Anything can be said and worked through in this house, because shame doesn't take hold if there's a home base and a compassionate witness to what your kid is going through. So the best there, though, is for her to come home, talk about it, me join with her and stay attached and be positive, find the things she's done right, and help her develop a plan to send her back out and do that hard work herself.
Okay.
Because otherwise, she's never gotten that skill. So she's then she could be 30 years old having, you know, somebody blast the shit out of her. Excuse my language today, y'all. I hope.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Trust me.
And then she's like, okay, where's my mama? Well, mama doesn't come to the workplace.
Right.
You know? But if she's had that neural pathway from when she was 13 years old, she can access that again.
I love that. Yes, I love that. You should teach parenting classes. Okay, we got to go on this. We got to go on a question here. Okay. Adrian, it's a little bit lengthy, so I'm going to kind of float through it here, but she's working on attachment, relational space, different difficult conversation, relationship repair, and keeps meeting people who want to, they want to share their wisdom with her, which she finds disempowering and not respecting to her ability to know things too, right? So she said, can you speak about how to share with others my boundary that I don't want to be told something unless I ask, which I think we touched on some of that, but she said, I need to convey that I don't want the other person to share their wisdom. I got this, I know this, but in a relational way. I usually keep my mouth shut, which makes her feel angry and disempowered, which, yeah, I understand that. She's willing to do the work for herself, but someone keeps coming to try and to do it for her.
Yeah. So she's the answer to that question, although it's going to sound a lot easier than it is that she's got somebody mowing her yard, which tells me that there needs to be a lock on the fence, a lock on the gate. So you may have to take some cutoff time. You know, in this continuum of cutoff, balance to enmeshment, it's down here on enmeshment. You may have to swing out to cut off, get some space so that the relationship has time to reset. And so the question I have is, what's going on in that relationship that that person thinks that it's okay to come mow your yard?
Mm,
So the direct answer to that is the fence at some point either wasn't there or was too flexible, and it's time to tighten that up. Now,
okay.
here's the thing that's kind of nice is boundary busters tend not to get their feelings hurt. We that are afraid to set boundaries are usually much more sensitive than the boundary buster. So
Mm,
if you test it out and just say, blame it on me. Say, I heard a seminar today that I really need to be practicing boundaries. So don't take this wrong. I love having a relationship with you, but I'm really going to try to do my own work here. So if you're willing, I'd rather you not speak into this situation.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. Does that answer that?
Yes, and she was saying, what if they still get defensive? And that, one of the things I like to say about, I just want to stick my own 2 cents in here about dealing with people who get defensive and just they're taking everything so personally, right? First of all, being offended is one of the top problems we have today. I did a live about this back this summer when everybody was getting offended at everybody else. It's still very real, right? But I feel like sometimes we try to own why someone else is acting a certain way. We take it on ourselves to fix it, figure it out, make it our own problem. We make it about ourselves.
Mhm.
So if someone's getting defensive about something, one of the things I try to do is remind myself, this isn't mine. This is coming from them, and just remember where I belong in that relationship. So I don't get sucked into the vortex of offended and defensive and angry, because then you lose the whole idea of what it means to have a boundary, right?
Totally. And the healthier we are, the more we have the vantage point of seeing that that's not our stuff, that's their stuff.
Yes.
That is hard work. One of the best things you can do, and this is some of Brene Brown's stuff, is go find your person and say, hey, am I out of line here, or is this a reasonable reaction? To know somebody you trust that'll tell you the truth if it's on your side of the fence or if it's on their side of the fence. And you
Right.
got to trust that person to tell you. If they say that's on their side of the fence, then you got to ask yourself, okay, so why am I hurt?
Exactly. Okay. So this is a good segue to go into briefly. We just need to do a whole other thing on attachment, like across the board, a whole hour on it. But real quick, let's just touch on this. This kind of reminds me of, when we talk about attachment theory and we talk about why we behave the way we do, I feel like a lot of it can be attributed to what our attachment was to the parent, again, was it insecure? Was it this? Was it that? So touch real quickly on what attachment theory is and the 4 attachments that everybody has one, right?
Yeah. And we also can move in and out of attachment styles. So your best thing is to watch a few videos on YouTube.
And I'll share those guys in the replay. Absolutely.
Yeah, just Google attachment styles. But what we all want is to be securely attached to other people. And there's a lot in there, but in general, we can say there's secure attachment, there's anxious attachment, there's dismissive attachment, and there's avoidant. And what we want to be able to do is to be able to be securely in a relationship with somebody and not either shutting down to avoid rejection or manipulating that other person to calm us down. So in general, many times what we do is we take whatever dysregulation we have within us and project that into that white space between people.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm anxious that you're going to leave me, Carmen, then I'm going to be saying things or doing things to get you to prove to me that you're not going to leave. Well, guess what? You are going to want to run after a while because that feels like a tick on a dog.
Yes.
Or I might just shut down and dismiss you because I'm going to think more highly of myself than I should and look at you with contempt. So, if you had a parent that didn't hug you, didn't hold you, didn't tell you you were valuable, but really just looked at you with contempt. And you might do that to other people. So your answer is, we have to look at how our parents parented us and actually how they interacted with each other and other friends. And there's a great determination of that. Good news is that with the insecure, avoidant, dismissive attachment styles, the healing happens within the context of good relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you want to do is you want to speak that out loud. You can even Google, a quiz to see what your attachment style is.
I'll be providing plenty of resources. I got bookmarks on all that stuff.
Well, I think you're much more skilled in this than I am, but I think the key is, all right, what's going on with me? Am I trying to evoke something in you to feel okay, to calm or regulate myself?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Similarly, we can also do it the opposite way. I'm feeling jacked up, so I'm going to go pick a fight with this person so that we co-regulate, but at a dysregulated state. Does that make sense?
It completely does. And, as a self-professed, person who rides the roller coaster of insecure, secure, my only dismissive or, behavior that comes in is when I just need to take some time for myself to process. Other than that, I've moved from insecure into much more security and relationship. I don't want to speak for my ex's style, but I would guess that he was dismissive because of the explanation and how the relationship played out. We were like magnets to each other. And there was a question out there on the board, and I'll get to in a second, but I want to just kind of stay here for a moment in relationship. I've gotten a lot of messages from people that know my story that have said, I'm in a relationship I need to get out of, or my marriage, since this COVID thing happened, is destroying us. I just want to bring a little bit of light to this case, even though it's too late for my marriage, is we were two magnets, insecure and dismissive. We were drawn together and our wounds were exposed in probably one of the ugliest ways they can be exposed, but exposed all the same. So having the opportunity for me to see what my wounds were was an avenue for healing and hope. Yes. So I just want to say that even if if you all recognize something in yourself that goes, oh my gosh, I'm insecure, or oh my gosh, I'm anxious, or I'm avoidant, or whatever, at least you're becoming aware that there's something in you that wants your attention for you to focus on, so that you can repair what's happening in you and become those two autonomous people that have a relationship together.
Yes. And one thing I would say about that is, don't try to fix yourself. It's too hard. It's actually impossible, because we heal within the context of relationships too. The thing that I would say is the magnet thing is that we actually, and we don't know how the brain does this, but what it does is it goes back to familiar. Mm-hmm. So there's a high likelihood that you're going to go reenact generationally what's happened before. Mm-hmm. And so the awareness and doing that work, and for years, it was too painful or too scary, to go, I can't be flawed at all, because my shame meter was so high that I couldn't take feedback. I just couldn't, because I had not done enough work to have a healthy infrastructure. And I would say, stick your toe in it. So you'll find so much freedom if you can just go, I'm a freaking train wreck just like everybody else is. I don't have the answers. I need people just like everybody else is, and I want to heal. And that's all it is. It's not character flaws. It's not disorders. It's wounds that need to be healed. Otherwise, we're going to wound other people and re-traumatize ourselves.
Yes. And it is absolutely hands down. I reenacted my parents' relationship. I mean, I am my mother. I swear to God. I told her, I said, stop having pain in your wrist, because I'm getting it too. Like I'm a mirror of her. And he reenacted his relationship. So we brought that into this situation. The beautiful thing about it is that, I always remember, you must think all I do is think about the things you said to me, but
it's so honoring to me. I mean, my life's work, it means so much.
Well, you're in my head a lot. You can ask anybody, all my students and everybody, but you said to me, this is a crucial time for your child to not be exposed to the dysfunction and carry it into his own future in his life. And guess what? my nephew who lives here, who's 20, he has all his friends 20 to 22 or whatever, 19 or whatever. And they come over and they're just like, tell us about attachment theory and boundaries in relationships. Tell us about, they want to talk about this stuff. And it makes me so happy because I tell them all the time. And even when, my kid gets angry with me or upset or whatever, I say, I just want to send you into the world as a healthy, well-adjusted, adaptable human being who knows how to love and have good relationships so that the dysfunction of the generations we've carried into this can stop right now. Yeah. You deserve joy and love. All of our children do. We do too. Yeah. So with that said, there's questions. Can we go just a few minutes longer? Are you okay with that?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. So Natalie's saying, my 17-year-old son suddenly put walls around himself, set his boundaries, but I feel abandoned. I feel like a bad mom. How do I accept his boundaries without falling apart? Been there before. Go ahead. This is your.
I always tell this story. My Ryan, who's now 28, when he I was driving south on 65 and he called and he goes, Mom, I need to go to therapy and it's about you. And I know right where I was and I almost vomited in my mouth, but it was one of his first steps towards saying, I can handle this and I'm going to go work on this and that kind of stuff. The thing that you want to do is talk about it with him, and I remember Ryan saying, Mom, we have a better relationship than all of our friends. And I was thinking, well, hell, I can't imagine what those relationships are like. But you want, you want to talk and you want to say, what you want to do is you want to stay in your adult part, because when you're feeling abandoned, you're in a younger part. Mm-hmm. And you want to remember what is that goal as a mama for that kid, which is to launch them. So the boundaries, but I'd say, okay, are these boundaries appropriate? What is he asking for? And then you figure out every way you can to stay attached. And I mean, we had a kid live with us for 8 years. And when he got to us, he knew hunger. And I would get up in the mornings and I would fry him 5 fried eggs, because when he had 5 fried eggs to eat for breakfast, that's probably grossing you out as a health coach.
Not at all.
He would sit and talk to me, and I would never, I didn't cross any boundaries. I would just let him talk. So figure out, be a student of your kid. What does he need? And then the hardest thing to do is say, how am I being as a parent? They will tell you the truth. What am I not doing that you need? What do I need to own that I've done? It's hard, but I'm going to tell you that makes them feel safe. So clean out the closet on that. What am I doing? What can I do better? What have I done that I need to own? I can remember telling Kelsey recently, I'm just so sorry I spanked you. I did not know that was a bad thing to do. She goes, Mom, how many times are you going to apologize for that? But that was good for me to hear that it resonated with her, that I was cleaning that closet out.
Yes. And that's exactly, I did the same thing. And I remember texting you about it when I finally, at one point, this is before we moved here and whatnot. And I went up to Braden's room and I said, what can I do? What can I do? And what have I done? It's wide open. The floor is open. You can cuss if you need to. You can say anything you want to me. What in the world have I done and to make you this angry? And then he told me what it was, which I'm not going to exhibit here, but and I was able to say, you were absolutely right. You knew better than I did, and I should have listened to you, and I'm sorry. And the door is open for you to always come to me. As long as you're doing it with respect, I will always hear you. I may not always agree with you, but you tell me anything that you need to tell me. Yeah. And I will not be angry or judgmental of your feelings.
And I would say be careful on that. I couldn't remember the person that asked the question's name, but I would really be careful to make sure that the boundaries aren't to wall up for secrets that he's keeping. If he's out doing stupid stuff, you make sure you know that. Right. That because sometimes, I mean, they're smart. Those kids are smart, and they might know your chink in your armor, that they can do this to get by without you looking. So just make sure in this day and age, make sure you know what's going on.
Yeah. That they're not doing that just so you don't know, you're not getting your toe in their life at all. Right. 17 is still not an adult.
Right. No, 100%.
Right. Okay. We've got 2 more questions and then we're going to put a bow on it. Anonymous attendee, my biggest verbal boundaries were set when college and post-college kids came home to visit or stay long-term. I redefined the relationship as either an invited guest who didn't have full access to the whole house, like doing laundry without asking, or they are considered a family member who is then expected to participate in chores and have full household access. Would you add anything to this, or do you have thoughts on this process?
Oh, I'm going to use that. That's awesome. I mean, my answer was to that was when my adult son and his wife came home. I rented an Airbnb. They were real cheap in Nashville at the time, and they came home for a month, and it just worked for us because I couldn't handle that full access, but I love that delineation on how that goes, because, you know, a lot of times those kids come home and think they're guests.
Oh,
So,
yes. Oh, yes. I would agree with that completely.
no, I wouldn't add anything to that, and I'm going to use it. That's awesome.
That's awesome. Okay, so Jesse is saying, how does the balance of making sure you aren't enmeshed with someone else relate to being in a marriage union?
Okay, so I one time heard a pastor say there's a fine line between deep intimacy and enmeshment, or, you know, codependency, which I don't like that word. The question is, you know, is it healthy? You know, are there areas, and you want to constantly be asking yourself, where can we improve? And there's a lot of wrong Christianese out there that would say, you know, that you shouldn't be autonomous, or somebody's in charge and somebody else is underneath that. That's bad theology. And so I think the question is, how functional are we? How healthy we are? Do we have blind spots? You know, are we isolated from other people? You know, are we keeping other relationships going? But I'm all about deep emotional intimacy with your spouse. I mean, that's a beautiful thing. One way to tell that is, you know, is there volatility? Because if there is volatility, it's probably too close.
Yeah.
You know, there probably needs to be some work done there. But a great question that I don't have a true cut answer for that. I think you have to ask yourself some of those hard questions.
Yeah. And so
And
I was, go
on
ahead.
that, sorry, I'm interrupting.
Yeah.
But we want to make sure, beyond a shadow of a doubt, we're not looking at it from the lens of self-righteousness, that we have the one answer and have this figured out. Because many times when we think that, we have blind spots, and also we're projecting stuff on other people that can be very damaging.
Right. Yeah. And also, let me add to this too, you know, Cloud and Townsend, the book Boundaries that KK was talking about. And just as a reminder, anyone that's listening that's registered, you're going to get a replay. You're going to get some resources to help take your knowledge further on boundaries and attachment. We're coming back to talk about attachment for sure, because that is just one of my, oh my gosh, my all-time favorite topics for sure. But I'm also want to suggest that, you know, the book by Cloud and Townsend, Boundaries in Marriage. There's also a book, Boundaries with Teenagers. Boundaries in Dating. If you're back out in the world of dating, I read that one when I started dating again, and I thought, what in the heck? Why am I even bothering with all of this, right? At 47 or 48 and dating again, it's imperative that we understand that it's different. Boundaries are the same, but what I learned from reading all of these books is that they show up in very different ways depending on the relationship that we have.
In the book, Carmen, remind me the title, How People Grow, that they wrote.
Yes, How People Grow. And oh my gosh, there's so many of them, so many books that they've written. And then I want to say this too, kind of as a primer for people, the book on attachment. If you're interested in taking your knowledge of attachment deeper, it will benefit you in a million different ways, because attachment, you know, our attachment style can show up in all relationships, right? If we get triggered by a behavior and experience a person, and we aren't securely attached, or we don't have security, it can show up, like you talked about earlier, as us projecting to make ourselves feel better for that familiar feeling. So that's not just with relationships to other, you know, partners. It's in a lot of things.
It happens a lot in the workplace, and it's lots of that. That's true.
Yeah. So the book Attached, I wish I had it sitting here. I was reading it this morning, but by Diane Heller Poole, I think is the name, or Poole Heller. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, if you saw my bookcase right next to me, you'd be like, good Lord, she read anything but self-help over the last years, you know? But I think this stuff is fantastic. And I just want to say that for everybody out there that's listening, KK runs an amazing place up in Nashville called Tennessee Neurofeedback. The skills that she has with brain spotting and her approach to trauma and therapy literally saved me. Okay. And many people, and I will go to my grave with that, probably write it on the tombstone. But to say that you are not alone in whatever's going on with you. We all have something in our lives. I am trying to remove the stigma around emotional and mental health, about all the things that people think we should be running around perfect. We're all dealing with something.
Yes.
I think therapy is absolutely essential for anyone who discovers that they have some form of trauma. Find some help. A health coach can absolutely complement that relationship that person has and support them in between sessions.
Yes,
So you're not texting your therapist and saying, all right, I know I saw you an hour ago, but do you have time tomorrow?
Yeah.
When you're in crisis, right? So never ever feel like you have to go through this alone. And let's just bring some more awareness to the fact that there is absolutely nothing wrong with admitting that you need support in any area of your life.
It's actually
now.
unhealthy. It's actually unhealthy not to. And just one plug, if it's okay, I should have said this early. I'm only working remote. So I know you guys have reached out to me, and I'm happy to do Zoom calls as I have room. And I only see people that are also doing neurofeedback because I believe in that model so much. And we do have remote units, so you can access our services now from outside of town. So
yeah. And neurofeedback, it was a game changer, absolute game changer, and absolutely helped to open up those neural pathways for me to become aware of the things, like you were talking about, that I needed to work on and continually practice. I believe that was integral to the changes that I made. And also, to be honest with you, people would say to me all the time, I can't believe you're doing this well after what you've been through and all the trauma and all of that. And I'm like, I attribute that success and being able to move through this to neurofeedback and time with you, for sure.
So I think we said, and can you post it, that we're going to give a discount to everybody that's listening that wants to get a brain map, signs up. So if we can post that, if y'all contact us through the website, TNNFB, I will make sure you get a discount if you want to come in and get a brain map.
Yep. And just watch for instruction on the replay, guys. I'll make sure to share everything with everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today.
So fun. I want to come back. Let me know when.
We'll do the attachment thing. And thank you, everybody, for your great questions. And I mean, the staying power of everyone. This is absolutely a topic I'm seeing already. Thanks so much for the great conversation and your wisdom. So awesome. I needed this today. You guys, the first people we need to take care of as health coaches are ourselves. Yes. So that we can then be available for those people out there that are looking for the support that we have to offer. If you are looking for a health coach, we have a registry of health coaches. Watch for the replay. It's on I always get it wrong, ANWC, and I'll be sharing all those links. So everyone, take care of yourselves, your emotional and mental health, and I will talk to you soon, KK. We'll get it set up for attachment. Thanks again, everybody.
Take care, y'all. Bye-bye.
Bye.